Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I have the first in what will be a series of videos to talk about the glass installation in the 4,200 gallon aquarium. You can see there's glass in the tank. It's sealed in place. I'm in this fun time waiting for curing. And before I go any further on the build, I want to take the time to talk through the preparation of the glass, the installation of the glass, and of course I'll eventually get to filling and everything too. But today's video is all about preparation and getting the glass ready for installation. And the focus is going to be on glass leveling, glass positioning, glass spacers, and finally glass bracing for the sealing process. The first topic today I want to cover is glass leveling, which is very important for preparation, because if you don't have your sheets of glass level, it is going to cause problems with everything else you're trying to do in this prep work. Now, you might be asking, why do you need to level the glass? Isn't the glass already level? You built this aquarium level, right? Well, yes, I did. The stand has been laser leveled and built to level. The top aquarium brace beam system has been built level, and the top of the canopy has been built level. However, the bottom of the aquarium itself does have some unevenness to it and is not necessarily level. And the reason behind that is the inside of the bottom of the aquarium has had layers of wood filler, fiberglass, and epoxy applied. The layers of fiberglass and epoxy have overlapping layers to help seal the bottom of the tank, which has made some high and low spots in the aquarium. And that's why the glass potentially can be uneven from side to side in its long sheets. And when I had the glass moved into the house, I talked about having all the glass put onto these 1/2-inch PVC spacers. Now, these spacers have a number of functions. First, by putting them in here allows me to lift the glass to the proper height so that I'll get a 2-inch bottom and a 2-inch top seal on each sheet of glass. But these spacers do a lot more than that. These spacers allowed me to have low surface area so that I could easily slide the sheets of glass on here. It protects the actual bottom of the tank from that friction of trying to move sheets of glass back and forth. Also, these PVC spacers are softer than the glass, so they won't scratch it or damage it. And the final function, which is what we're talking about here, is leveling. Because each sheet of glass is at least on 2 of these spacers, it allows me to move them around to level. Now, some cases I was able to slide these spacers from high to low spots on the bottom of the tank to level each sheet of glass. And I simply just put a level on top of each sheet. I kept it that simple to just level these sheets. Now, why do this? Well, if the sheet of glass is not level in its sideways plane and it's tilted funny, well, it is going to create problems when your corners come together, because things aren't going to necessarily align, and you could have wider seams at the top and thinner at the bottom, or vice versa. And it's very important for all the corner alignment and the butt joint alignment to get these sheets level. For this process, it was pretty simple. I got the level out, my suction cups, and I started with my 6-foot sheets of glass. A couple of them didn't need hardly any leveling at all. And the first one I encountered, I used a composite shim underneath this PVC spacer to just lift the glass up a little higher. Worked out really well. However, this process came to a grinding halt when I hit my first 12-foot sheet of glass that needed to be leveled. Because I physically can't pick up a 12-foot sheet of glass on one end and try to kick a spacer underneath it to get on top of one of these shims. I was going to end up hurting myself or damaging the glass trying to do this. And I'm just going to admit it right now. I just can't lift something like that. I know I'm going to get hurt. I decided to get a little bit creative here. Thought about, well, how can I do this by myself safely? And I came up with the idea to use my suction cup and also one of my DeWalt clamps, where instead of having it to where when it ratchets together it squeezes something into a clamp, you can reverse it so that it will spread apart. and I used the clamp against the bottom and against the suction cup while attached to the glass to lift the glass up, because those clamps have about 600 pounds of force on them, which is more than enough to pick up an end of the sheet of glass. This wasn't the most perfect process. The clamp pushing on the suction cup would cause the suction cup to sometimes lose suction, so I had to kind of toy around with where it is. This was beyond the lifting limits of this suction cup, so it didn't last long before it started losing suction. Luckily, I only needed to raise the glass up, a 1/16 of an inch or so, and get the shim under it, and then I would repeat it if I needed to get the glass level. And I didn't have many shims to put in. It was only a half dozen shims through all 9 pieces of glass, so things worked out pretty well. With the glass leveled, the next thing that I needed to start working on was glass positioning. All 9 sheets of glass got delivered and roughly placed where they needed to be. However, many of them were very far out of alignment, in some cases by the whole thickness of glass. Again, you might be asking, how the heck did you build this thing if the glass just doesn't sit in there? Well, that is all due to the top aquarium brace beam structure. The top aquarium brace beams were built on top of the bottom seal beam, but that structure had to be lifted into the air. They are long beams up to 30 feet long, and I didn't attach them in a fixed point to the canopy posts. They're basically just floating there. This system gets attached to the aquarium when the glass is sealed to it. I wanted to make sure that I had room to move this top aquarium brace beam structure with the canopy posts in place. Everything is notched on the corners around the canopy posts so that the top aquarium brace beam system could be moved backwards, forwards, front to back, at angles to kind of twist things, get them nice and straight to where they needed to be. And that is the process I started. And I have to say, it was very frustrating. It took a lot longer than I thought. Matter of fact, I walked away from it a couple times just because I was frustrated. I started the process by installing my aquarium threaded rod cross braces with the PVC sleeves. I figured, let's get those installed. I'll just slightly tension these threaded rods just enough to straighten them out, and then we should be in a little better shape. Well, that was a huge mistake on my part, because as soon as I put any tension on these threaded rods, because of these long beams, especially the 24-foot section here, it started to compress these beams together and threw the glass off even more. The whole idea is to get them nice and straight and square so everything lines up, and I failed there. So all these threaded rod cross braces were detensioned. You can see there's a little bit of a sag in them, and literally all it is just the threaded rod is not detensioned, and under its own weight it has a little bit of a natural sag to it. Not a problem. These will come into play later when the tank is going to get filled. For now, they're just going to remain where they're at. So that was one problem I came across immediately. In shifting this around, what ended up happening and causing a lot of my frustration is I'd move one end and I'd fix a seam of glass and I'd be like, all right, cool, I got alignment here. Then I'd look at another piece and go, nope, now that one's off. Now how do I push, pull, twist, however you want to call it, move this beam system to get the glass pieces aligned? And it was time consuming and frustrating to just do small little adjustments. A 1/16 on one side could affect a 1/16 somewhere else. There was also another problem with the top aquarium brace beam system on the short L side. The 12-foot beam on the short L had a slight inward bow to it. It was just how it naturally sat when it was built. The unfortunate problem with that is it was pushing the glass out in the center, but leaving really wide gaps on either end. For that, I needed to install a 2x4 that actually pushed against its opposite side to straighten that beam out. It worked really good. It didn't need a lot of force, but in order to hold that beam straight for sealing, I needed to install that 2x4. As I got the glass fairly close to being aligned here and positioned properly, I stopped so that I could work on my glass spacers, which are a critical component to this preparation work. Well, why do you need glass spacers? What are they? What function do they serve? Well, glass spacers are typically in almost every aquarium out there. Someone uses a spacer in some way, shape, or form, because when you put two pieces of glass together to bond an aquarium with a silicone product, there has to be a gap between those sheets of glass in order for the silicone to occupy that space and create a bond for a seal. With this aquarium also having composites and everything too, it's the same thing. Whatever you're bonding the glass to, it has to be a room for a seal and a bond to take place. And that is what spacers do, is that they make sure you're holding apart those pieces of glass, or glass from beams, top and bottom seal beams for me, so that that silicone product will go in there and create a seal. The spacers can also have some other functions like they do in this aquarium. And typically spacers are like a 32nd, a 16th, or 3/32. For my aquarium project, I decided to go with 1/8 inch wide spacers. And I gotta say, it's a really wide spacer. It is not typical. But there are reasons for going with 1/8 inch spacers for me. Now the first one was that with this glass all being cut precision and there being no room for error here, I wanted to make sure that I gave myself just a little bit of extra fudge factor here. So if I did happen to measure something wrong, having an 1/8 inch on either side of the glass, if things were a little bit smaller than I thought they were and not as wide, I'd have an 1/8 of an inch to play with. I could take the glass on glass seams and narrow them down if I needed to in a worst case scenario. So that was the first reason for going with 1/8 inch spacers. The next reason, probably the most important reason here, was because I am building a custom tank with composite fiberglass epoxy beams on the top and bottom that are made of wood. I spent hundreds of hours building the bottom seal beam, the top aquarium brace beam system. But despite all that time, all that effort, when you are working with wood, fiberglass, and epoxy, no matter how hard you try, you're going to make a structure that is not perfect. It's not going to be perfectly straight. It's not going to be perfectly smooth. That's okay. The spacers are going to help you here as well. By pushing the glass off an 1/8 of an inch, if I have some high spots or low spots or some unevenness in the top and bottom seal beam here, it won't make a difference anymore because the glass is being held away from those imperfections. The whole idea here is you don't want the glass to be pushed into a pressure point where it has no cushion or not enough of a seal. So this 1/8 of an inch allows me to push the glass out further, so if there are some variations, it won't allow these beams to get close to the glass, as long as the glass has been positioned straight and the beam system has been made straight. So very important here to have these spacers. But it then raises the question of, what do I use for my 1/8 inch spacers? When I was looking for spacers, I had a really quick thought on this and knew, how about I just use some tile spacers? So you get the typical ones that are these little pluses or X's. They're made out of a rubbery material. I took those and sliced them down the middle so that I had these little boomerangs. And these little boomerangs are great because I was able to hang them off the bottom seal beam on the inside or hang them on the glass on the top side, and that would give me spacers that I could easily manipulate without having to worry about silicone getting in the way or having to glue these in preemptively, and it would minimize the chance that they fall into the seal while I'm putting the silicone on the aquarium. These work great, they're cheap, I could make hundreds of them quickly, and if I lose a few, who cares? I can just make more. So these little tile spacers work great for all the spacers around the tank. However, as always, there was one problem area with these spacers. That was the back 18 feet of the tank on the bottom seal. The little boomerangs that I made relied on me having outside access to the tank so that when the sealant is put in place, I can make sure that they're in place properly. They don't get squeezed out, they don't fall into the seal. But I can't do that back there because once that glass is pushed against that side, I have no access back there. After a little bit of time thinking about it, I came up with a great idea, and that is to use 1/8 inch acrylic. And what I ended up doing here is taking acrylic, cutting it on the chop saw into thin strips, and then using a heat gun to bend it into these little L's. And the nice thing about these is, from inside the tank, knowing the glass is sitting on a 1/2 inch spacer, I could push this underneath up to the bottom seal beam and then simply twist it upright. And that would give me a spacer that I could manipulate from inside the tank while I'm sealing the glass. So these were just a great little idea that helped me with the sealing process. And with them being acrylic and a little longer handle, acrylic's a little more brittle, so that once the glass is sealed in place, I could simply just snap or cut those little pieces of acrylic off and just leave little bits of them in the seal without hurting anything. So that is spacers. Once all the spacers were installed, I did a little bit more top adjustment to position the glass with the top seal beams until I was happy with the glass positioning. The whole idea of this was that all of the glass is pretty much going exactly where it needs to be. It doesn't need to be pushed into place with a huge amount of pressure. The whole idea is that it just gets put into place so it's resting where it needs to be. And that brings me to the last section of this video, which is bracing. Bracing is incredibly important here when it comes to sealing the tank. I needed a bracing system that I could move in and out quickly and be able to quickly and easily manipulate once the glass seal is in place, because you have to move fast for this process. Now for this, I had already made top aquarium glass bracing when I moved the glass into the house from moving. I took those same braces I had, which were just a 2x4 with an end kind of screwed into each side, and I adjusted the spacing so that a piece of 3/4 inch styrofoam could sit on either side and just put enough pressure on the glass to hold it in place. Wasn't trying to push it way out or move it, just hold it in place. Especially in the top aquarium brace beam system, because knowing what happened with the threaded rod cross braces, we don't want to bow the tank out, we want to keep it nice and straight. So that is what I set out to do with the top aquarium braces, and I made one approximately every 2 feet on the tank. On the ends, I simply would just hold them in with some clamps to hold the glass nice and firm up against their spacers. The bottom of the tank, I made 2x4s that were a little bit wider than the tank, and I would simply take a piece of styrofoam on each end and just wedge them into the tank front to back. In doing this, it just made it very easy and convenient to put that pressure in there. Didn't need to be a lot, again, just enough to hold the glass in place, squeeze out excess silicone to allow it to be the spacer thickness, and should be good to go. There was a problem with the bottom bracing I did need to overcome though. Trying to do this front to back bracing works great. However, there were 4 sections of the tank I could not brace front to back easily because there was no front to back available with a standard 2x4. The short L section of the tank that is 12 feet long and the 30-foot section of the tank, I had no way to front to back brace those with just a 2x4. So I just took a little bit of ingenuity here and I daisy chained multiple 2x4s together. I made a little horizontal 2x4 brace that pushed against the glass on either side with several points, and then using the same technique that I did for lifting the glass, I took my clamp and reversed it so that it would push outwards. So the idea is once the glass seal was in place, you go in the tank, you push those 2x4s apart to apply some pressure to the glass, and then you install some screws to hold that pressure. So I did that for the 12-foot section and also for the 30-foot section, just a daisy chain of 2x4s to hold it all together. It's pretty simple. It doesn't need to be complicated. The idea is, again, all we need to do is just hold the glass in place. That is all the preparation work that I did to get the glass ready for installation on the 4,200 gallon display. If you got comments or questions, please go ahead and leave them down below in the comments. I'm always happy to share. I'm going to have more videos here. The next one that I'm going to release is going to be about the installation of the glass, as that of course didn't go to plan like it should have, but I got the job done with the help of some great friends. And so more to see on that video. If you want to see more, of course, go ahead and subscribe. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.